Fired by boss who tried to steal my startup idea. He didn't know it was a trap. The email notification on my phone buzzed against the wooden table of our cramped two-bedroom apartment. I was sipping my morning coffee, scrolling through the usual barrage of work messages and marketing newsletters, when one particular subject line caught my eye: urgent meeting, CEO's office, 10 a.m. My stomach tightened instinctively. Urgent meetings with Richard Thompson, the CEO of Innovatech Solutions, were never good news. At 32, I had spent the better part of my career climbing the corporate ladder at one of Silicon Valley's most promising tech companies. But lately, things had felt off. Just last week, during our quarterly brainstorming session, I had pitched an idea that had been brewing in my mind for months. It wasn't just any idea. It was a revolutionary approach to digital privacy protection, something that could potentially change how people interacted with their personal data online. The room had gone silent as I presented my concept, a decentralized AI-powered platform that would allow users to control and monetize their own data trails. When I finished, Richard's eyes had gleamed with an intensity that made me uneasy. He dismissed the idea as too ambitious for our current product lineup, but I noticed how he lingered after the meeting, asking detailed questions about the technical feasibility. As I sat staring at the email, memories of that meeting played back in my mind like a warning bell. Something about Richard's interest had felt predatory, though at the time I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Now, as I prepared for this unexpected summons, those warning signs seemed glaringly obvious. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my coffee mug. This wasn't normal procedure, not for Richard, who preferred to handle everything through carefully orchestrated email chains and scheduled performance reviews. The walk to the executive floor felt longer than usual. Every step echoed in the cavernous glass atrium of Innovatech's headquarters, each sound amplifying the growing knot in my stomach. When I reached the frosted glass doors of the CEO's suite, Richard's assistant barely looked up from her computer screen before waving me in. That casual dismissal should have been my first real clue. Normally, she maintained strict protocols about who could enter and when. Richard stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to me, gazing out at the San Francisco skyline. Without turning around, he gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. "Have a seat, Clara," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of manufactured warmth that always preceded bad news. As I settled into the leather chair, I noticed several documents spread across his desk, including what looked like a hastily printed copy of my presentation slides. "I've been reviewing your recent proposal," he began, finally turning to face me. His expression was unreadable, a perfect mask of corporate neutrality. "While innovative, it doesn't align with our current strategic direction." He paused, letting the words hang in the air between us. "However, I'm concerned about your focus and whether your energies are best served here at Innovatech." My heart sank as I recognized the pattern. This was classic Richard Thompson manipulation. First, dismiss the idea as unworkable. Then, question the employee's commitment. Finally, present an ultimatum that somehow benefited him while appearing to offer you a choice. But there was something different this time, a tension in his posture, a slight trembling in his hands as he picked up a pen and tapped it rhythmically against the desk. "You've been with us for 5 years, he continued, his voice taking on that paternalistic tone he reserved for his most calculated moves. "But perhaps it's time to consider if this environment is still challenging enough for someone of your talents." The way he emphasized talents sent a chill down my spine. In that moment, I realized he wasn't just dismissing my idea, he wanted it for himself. The pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. The unusual interest in my presentation details. The sudden performance review. The carefully worded suggestion that maybe Innovatech wasn't the right place for me anymore. Richard wasn't planning to fire me because of poor performance. He was preparing to steal my concept and push me out before I could realize what was happening. But what Richard didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that I had been expecting this moment for weeks. Since the day I'd first conceived of my data privacy platform, I'd known it was too valuable to trust solely to Innovatech's innovation pipeline. Every late night spent coding in my apartment, every discreet conversation with trusted colleagues, every encrypted backup stored on private servers, all of it had been building toward this confrontation. As Richard launched into his prepared speech about career trajectories and new opportunities, I let myself smile inwardly. Because while he thought he was setting a trap, he was actually walking straight into mine. The idea he so desperately wanted to claim as his own was already protected by layers of legal safeguards and technological innovations that he couldn't even comprehend. And the real beauty of it? He wouldn't realize he'd been outmaneuvered until it was far too late. The meeting concluded with Richard's practiced sympathy and a firm handshake that felt more like a claiming than a farewell. As I walked back to my desk to collect my belongings, I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement mixed with righteous anger. For months, I had played the role of the dedicated employee, all while secretly building the foundation of my true vision. Now, as I packed up my personal items, I knew the real game was just beginning. The office buzzed around me with its usual mid-morning energy, but I moved through it like a ghost, invisible yet hyper-aware of every detail. Colleagues offered sympathetic glances as they saw the box in my arms, their expressions a mix of genuine concern and professional relief. It wasn't them getting shown the door today. My fingers brushed against the smooth surface of my external hard drive, safely tucked away in my bag. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was leaving with exactly what Richard thought he was keeping. Security protocols had been my domain at Innovatech, and I'd used that knowledge to create multiple fail-safe measures. Every crucial component of my project existed in triplicate, encrypted backups scattered across secure servers worldwide, proprietary algorithms divided into fragments stored with trusted contacts, and comprehensive documentation filed with my attorney under strict confidentiality agreements. But the most brilliant safeguard lay in what I hadn't shared. The core algorithm that made the entire system function remained only in my head and in 3 separate physical locations, each requiring specific authentication codes known only to me. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, my phone vibrated with incoming messages. The first wave came from former colleagues expressing shock and support, quickly followed by automated notifications from my various monitoring systems. Each alert represented another layer of protection activating, virtual machines spinning up, encrypted files self-replicating, security protocols tightening around my distributed network. I watched as Richard's attempts to access my project triggered alerts across my personal dashboard, his every move now visible to me in real time. The cab ride home gave me time to reflect on how methodically I'd prepared for this moment. During lunch breaks, I'd coded in coffee shops using burner laptops. Late nights were spent documenting every patentable aspect of my invention, time-stamped and notarized through blockchain verification. Even the seemingly casual conversations with industry contacts had been carefully orchestrated information drops, creating a web of witnesses to the evolution of my idea. Every action had been designed to leave an unassailable paper trail proving my ownership and development timeline. Back at my apartment, I powered up my personal workstation, watching as my intrusion detection systems reported Richard's team attempting to access my old Innovatech accounts. They were moving exactly as I'd predicted, following the breadcrumbs I'd deliberately left during my tenure. What they found would appear legitimate enough to satisfy initial scrutiny, a collection of outdated prototypes and incomplete code snippets, but none of it contained the critical components that made my system revolutionary. Most importantly, I had anticipated Richard's ego-driven approach. Tech executives like him operated under the assumption that ideas were commodities, easily transferable and replicable by their teams of developers. They failed to understand that true innovation was deeply personal, built from years of experience, unique insights, and intimate understanding of both technology and human behavior. The essence of my platform, the way it seamlessly integrated user psychology with advanced cryptography, couldn't be reverse-engineered from stolen code or replicated by hired programmers. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Marcus, my closest confidant at Innovatech. He's called an emergency meeting with the dev team, the text read. They're trying to piece together your notes. I smiled grimly, knowing exactly what they would find, carefully constructed dead ends and intentionally misleading documentation that would waste weeks of their time while I executed the next phase of my plan. The apartment filled with the soft hum of my servers coming online, each machine representing another node in my carefully constructed network of defenses. I had invested heavily in both hardware and software solutions, creating a decentralized infrastructure that mirrored the very principles of my data privacy platform. Multiple layers of encryption, quantum-resistant algorithms, and adaptive security protocols worked in concert to protect my intellectual property. Even if Richard managed to breach one layer, he would find nothing but more sophisticated obstacles waiting beyond. What Richard truly underestimated was the depth of my preparation and the strength of my convictions. This wasn't just about protecting an idea. It was about proving that innovation couldn't be bought or stolen, that true creativity required integrity and authenticity. Every sleepless night spent perfecting my safeguards, every personal sacrifice made to fund my preparations, had been worth it for this moment. As I monitored the real-time analytics of Richard's futile attempts to appropriate my work, I felt a profound sense of vindication. The final piece of my strategy lay in the public sphere. Over the past months, I had strategically released small, seemingly unrelated research papers and open-source contributions that, when viewed together, formed a clear narrative of my technological journey. These publications established my credentials and created an undeniable record of my expertise in the field. Should Richard attempt to claim my idea as his own, he would find himself facing not just my legal protections, but an entire community of peers who could testify to my pioneering work. Sitting in the dim glow of my monitors, I watched as Richard's team bounced between false leads and carefully planted misinformation. Each failed attempt strengthened my position, adding another layer of evidence to my case. The system I had built wasn't just protecting my idea, it was documenting every move Richard made, creating an irrefutable record of his attempted theft. And as the hours passed, I realized that this wasn't merely about defense anymore, it was about turning Richard's greed into the very instrument of his downfall. The days that followed my termination transformed into a whirlwind of calculated actions and meticulous planning. With each passing hour, I activated another layer of my carefully constructed counter-strategy. The first morning after my firing, I initiated contact with Victoria Chun, the investigative journalist who had been quietly following Innovateka's business practices for months. Our communication channels were secured through a custom-built messaging application I had developed specifically for this purpose, one that employed quantum-secure encryption and automatic deletion protocols after each message was read. Victoria's interest had been piqued when I first reached out 6 months ago, sharing anonymized data about questionable patent acquisitions and suspicious hiring practices at Innovatek. At the time, I had positioned these disclosures as insider tips from a concerned employee. Now, with Richard's attempted theft of my project, we had the perfect storm of corporate malfeasance and personal betrayal. Through our secure channel, I began feeding Victoria carefully curated evidence, timestamps of my idea development, internal communications showing Richard's increasing interest, and most damning of all, the real-time data of his team's attempts to access my protected information. Simultaneously, I activated my network of allies within the tech community. There was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the cryptography expert who had helped me refine my platform's core algorithms, and who now controlled one of the 3 physical components of my security system. Her university research lab became an unofficial safe house for critical parts of my project. Then there was Marcus, whose position in Innovateka's IT department allowed him to provide insider information while maintaining plausible deniability. He forwarded me Richard's increasingly desperate emails to the development team, each message inadvertently strengthening my case. The technical aspects of my operation required constant attention. Every 24 hours, I rotated my server nodes across different international jurisdictions, leveraging cloud services from providers who valued privacy above all else. My automated scripts monitored Richard's attempts to penetrate my security layers, documenting each failed breach attempt with precise timestamps and IP address tracking. These records weren't just for my protection, they were pieces of evidence that would prove invaluable when the time came to expose Richard's actions. Financial preparations had been underway for months. I had liquidated my savings, converting assets into cryptocurrency held in multiple wallets protected by multi-signature authentication. Some funds were allocated to operational costs, server maintenance, legal fees, living expenses, while others were strategically placed in accounts that could be accessed only through specific conditions being met. This financial firewall ensured that even if Richard attempted to freeze my assets through legal means, I would maintain operational capacity. Perhaps the most satisfying aspect of my preparations was the media component. Using anonymous posting accounts I had created over the past year, I began seeding the tech community forums with carefully crafted hints about Innovateka's unethical practices. These posts, written in technical jargon that only industry insiders would fully appreciate, painted a picture of a company willing to cross ethical boundaries to maintain its competitive edge. Each post included subtle references to my own work, establishing a clear timeline of my contributions and innovations. My mornings became a ritual of strategic warfare. I would start by reviewing the previous night's automated reports, analyzing Richard's team's progress, or rather lack thereof, in accessing my system. Mid-mornings were dedicated to coordinating with Victoria, crafting narratives that would resonate with both the tech community and general public. Afternoons involved technical maintenance and system upgrades, ensuring that my defenses remained impenetrable. Evenings were spent documenting everything, every interaction, every piece of evidence, every decision made, creating a comprehensive record that would withstand legal scrutiny. The psychological toll of maintaining this operation was heavier than I had anticipated. Sleep became fragmented, interrupted by the need to respond to urgent system alerts or verify new evidence coming in from Marcus. Meals were often forgotten in the heat of documenting another failed breach attempt or drafting another carefully worded message to Victoria. Yet through it all, I found a strange sense of purpose, a clarity of mission that transcended the fear and uncertainty of unemployment. Each day brought new developments that strengthened my position. The media seeds I had planted began sprouting, with respected tech bloggers picking up on the rumors about Innovateca's practices. Industry analysts started questioning the company's recent patent filings, noting similarities to concepts I had discussed in my academic publications. Meanwhile, Richard's increasingly aggressive attempts to access my system generated more documented evidence of wrongdoing. I maintained a careful balance between aggression and restraint. While I could have exposed Richard's actions immediately, I knew that patience would yield greater rewards. Every day he spent chasing shadows in my system, every resource he wasted pursuing dead ends, weakened his position while strengthening mine. The operation had become a complex dance of timing and execution, each move calculated to maximize impact while minimizing risk. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself marveling at how seamlessly my preparations had come together. What had started as a simple idea for protecting personal data had evolved into a masterclass in strategic foresight and technological preparation. Every late night spent coding security protocols, every personal sacrifice made to fund my defenses, every ounce of energy devoted to documenting my work, each had contributed to creating an impenetrable fortress around my innovation. The transformation in my daily life was profound. My once quiet apartment had become command central for what felt like a covert operation. Monitors displayed real-time data streams showing Richard's team's futile attempts to breach my system. Automated alerts chimed at regular intervals, each notification representing another layer of evidence documenting his misconduct. My whiteboard wall, once covered with grocery lists and reminder notes, now displayed complex flowcharts detailing potential scenarios and response strategies. Yet amid this high-stakes chess game, moments of profound personal growth emerged unexpectedly. The discipline required to maintain such an intricate operation forced me to develop new levels of focus and resilience. I learned to manage stress through structured routines, breaking down each day into precisely timed blocks of activity. Morning meditation sessions became essential for maintaining mental clarity, while evening journaling helped process the emotional weight of the situation. These practices transformed what could have been overwhelming pressure into manageable challenges. My relationships evolved in unexpected ways. Trusted colleagues like Marcus became more than just professional contacts, they became partners in a shared mission. Our interactions took on a deeper significance, each conversation carrying the weight of mutual trust and shared purpose. Even my relationship with Victoria, the investigative journalist, developed into something resembling a mentorship. Her guidance on navigating media exposure and public relations proved invaluable, teaching me skills that extended far beyond the immediate crisis. The technical challenges pushed my abilities to new heights. Solving complex security issues and developing innovative protection mechanisms forced me to think creatively and adapt quickly. I found myself drawing on knowledge from diverse fields, cryptography, psychology, game theory, synthesizing these disciplines into novel solutions. This multidisciplinary approach not only strengthened my project's defenses, but also expanded my understanding of how different fields intersect in problem solving. Perhaps most surprisingly, the experience fostered a deep appreciation for the power of preparation and foresight. Watching Richard's predictable patterns unfold exactly as I had anticipated reinforced the value of strategic thinking. I learned to anticipate not just immediate threats but also secondary and tertiary consequences of actions. This heightened awareness extended beyond my current situation, influencing how I approached decision-making in all aspects of life. The operation also revealed unexpected strengths within myself. I discovered a capacity for calculated risk-taking that I hadn't previously recognized. Making decisions that balanced immediate needs with long-term goals required a level of confidence and decisiveness that surprised even me. Each successful maneuver against Richard's attempts to appropriate my work built not just my technical capabilities, but also my belief in my own judgment and resilience. As the weeks passed, I found myself developing a philosophy of innovation that went beyond mere technical achievement. True creativity, I realized, required more than just original ideas. It demanded the courage to protect and nurture those ideas against forces that would seek to appropriate them. This understanding transformed my perception of success from mere recognition of talent to the establishment of a sustainable ecosystem where genuine innovation could thrive free from exploitation. The physical space of my apartment reflected this evolution. What had once been a simple living area had organically transformed into a hybrid workspace that embodied my journey. The corner where I once read novels now housed a secure document storage system. The dining table became a war room for strategy sessions. Even my bookshelves had evolved, now displaying technical manuals alongside volumes on psychology and corporate ethics. Each element told a story of adaptation and growth, mirroring the transformation occurring within myself. Through it all, I maintained a careful balance between the professional and the personal. Regular video calls with family provided emotional grounding, while online communities of innovators and entrepreneurs offered professional support and validation. This dual support system proved crucial in maintaining perspective, reminding me that while the stakes were high, they were ultimately part of a larger journey of personal and professional development. As I monitored Richard's increasingly desperate attempts to access my system, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come since that first spark of an idea. The woman who had initially conceived of a data privacy platform was fundamentally different from the person now orchestrating this complex operation. Experience had forged me into someone capable of standing against corporate power structures, armed not just with technology but with wisdom, strategy, and an unshakable belief in the value of authentic innovation. The unfolding drama between Richard and me had evolved into something far more complex than a simple case of intellectual property theft. As I watched his attempts to appropriate my work grow increasingly frantic, I began noticing patterns that hinted at a much larger scheme at play. The resources he was throwing at the problem, hiring specialized cybersecurity firms, contracting independent hackers, even attempting to poach key members of my former team, suggested he wasn't just interested in my data privacy platform. Something bigger was driving his obsession, something that connected to other mysterious activities I had observed during my time at Innovatech. My suspicions were confirmed when Marcus forwarded me a series of confidential memos marked Project Umbra. These documents outlined a shadow initiative that went far beyond anything I had initially suspected. Richard wasn't merely trying to steal individual ideas, he was building a comprehensive framework for systematically appropriating emerging technologies across multiple sectors. My data privacy platform represented just one piece of a larger puzzle, a sophisticated network of shell companies and patent holding entities designed to monopolize innovation in the tech industry. The implications were staggering. Project Umbra's tentacles reached into government contracts, venture capital funding, and even academic research institutions. Through carefully orchestrated partnerships and strategic investments, Richard had created a mechanism for identifying promising innovations early, then either acquiring them outright or sabotaging their development if acquisition proved impossible. My case wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a well-oiled machine designed to maintain Innovatech's dominance in the tech world through whatever means necessary. As I delved deeper into the documentation Marcus provided, a chilling pattern emerged. Several former Innovatech employees had experienced similar situations to mine, though none had been able to mount an effective defense. Their projects had disappeared into the corporate black hole of Project Umbra, resurfacing months later as innovations credited to Richard's team. The few who had tried to fight back found themselves facing ruinous lawsuits and character assassination campaigns that effectively silenced their protests. The realization hit me with the force of a thunderclap. I wasn't just fighting for my own idea anymore. I was standing at the intersection of a much larger battle for the soul of technological innovation. The values I had fought to protect, authenticity, integrity, and the democratization of technological advancement, were under systematic attack by a corporate machine that viewed innovation as just another commodity to be harvested and exploited. This understanding crystallized my resolve in ways I hadn't anticipated. The operation I had been running wasn't merely about personal vindication or protecting my intellectual property. It had become a test case for challenging the very foundations of corporate innovation appropriation. Every piece of evidence I gathered, every defensive measure I implemented, every strategic move I made was contributing to something far greater than my individual struggle. I began reaching out to other tech professionals who had encountered similar situations with Innovatech and other major players in the industry. Through encrypted channels and secure meetups, I started piecing together a network of individuals who had witnessed or fallen victim to Project Umbra's machinations. The stories they shared painted a disturbing picture of an industry where true innovation was increasingly stifled by corporate interests more focused on maintaining market dominance than fostering genuine progress. The complexity of the situation required a recalibration of my strategy. What had begun as a personal defensive operation needed to evolve into something more comprehensive, a coordinated effort to expose and dismantle the mechanisms that allowed corporations like Innovatech to prey on individual innovators. This meant expanding my network of allies, developing more sophisticated documentation methods, and creating a framework for supporting other inventors and researchers who found themselves targeted by similar schemes. My daily operations took on new dimensions as I incorporated these broader objectives into my plans. Server space was allocated for storing evidence from other victims of Project Umbra. Cryptographic protocols were modified to accommodate secure collaboration among multiple parties. Legal strategies were adjusted to account for the possibility of class action litigation against Innovatech's practices. Each modification represented another step toward transforming my personal crusade into a movement for systemic change. The media campaign I had been carefully orchestrating gained new urgency and direction. Rather than focusing solely on my individual case, I began working with Victoria to craft a narrative that highlighted the broader implications of corporate innovation appropriation. We identified key journalists, industry watchdogs, and policymakers who could help bring attention to the systemic issues underlying cases like mine. The goal shifted from merely exposing Richard's actions to initiating a wider conversation about how the tech industry approaches intellectual property and innovation rights. As I integrated these new elements into my operation, I found myself grappling with the weight of responsibility that came with this expanded mission. Protecting my own work had been challenging enough. Now I was shouldering the hopes and fears of countless other innovators who had been silenced or marginalized by corporate interests. The psychological demands increased exponentially, requiring even more rigorous self-care routines and support systems to maintain my effectiveness. Yet despite the added pressure, I felt a profound sense of purpose that transcended my initial motivations. The connection between individual cases of innovation theft and the broader systemic issues became increasingly clear. Every piece of evidence I gathered, every ally I recruited, every strategic move I made contributed to building a foundation for meaningful change in how the tech industry approached intellectual property and innovation rights. The operation had transformed from a personal defense mechanism into a catalyst for industry-wide reform. What had started as a carefully planned trap for Richard had evolved into a comprehensive strategy for challenging the very foundations of corporate innovation appropriation. As I monitored the growing network of evidence and coordinated efforts, I realized that the true victory wouldn't come from simply exposing Richard's actions. It would emerge from creating a new paradigm where genuine innovation could thrive free from predatory corporate practices. Time became both enemy and ally as the operation entered its critical phase. Each day brought new variables to manage, new pieces falling into place while others threatened to unravel. The calendar on my workstation showed overlapping timelines, legal deadlines for filing official complaints, expiration dates for certain evidence warrants, optimal windows for media releases. Like a conductor managing an increasingly complex symphony, I orchestrated these temporal elements with precision born from necessity. Richard's behavior grew increasingly erratic, his desperation manifesting in predictable patterns. Every 72 hours, his team would launch a new assault on my system's defenses, each attempt more aggressive than the last. I documented these cycles meticulously, noting how they aligned with board meetings, investor calls, and quarterly reporting periods. The pressure from his own corporate structure was mounting, forcing him to accelerate his attempts to appropriate my work. This acceleration, while dangerous, played perfectly into my timeline calculations. The media component of my strategy required particularly delicate timing. Working with Victoria, we mapped out a cascade of revelations designed to build momentum without tipping our hand too early. Initial reports would focus on isolated incidents of corporate innovation theft, gradually connecting these dots to form a comprehensive picture of Project Umbra's operations. Each article, each interview, each social media thread was scheduled to maximize impact while maintaining plausible deniability about my involvement, until the moment arrived for full disclosure. Legal considerations added another layer of chronological complexity. Statutes of limitations, evidence preservation requirements, and procedural deadlines created a lattice of temporal constraints that had to be navigated with absolute precision. My attorney, Sarah Chun, maintained a separate timeline tracking these legal elements, cross-referencing them with our operational schedule to ensure maximum synergy between public exposure and legal action. The timing of certain court filings would need to coincide perfectly with media revelations to prevent Richard from implementing damage control measures. Internal dynamics at Innovatech provided valuable intelligence about Richard's timeline pressures. Marcus's reports indicated growing dissent among senior executives, many of whom had become aware of Project Umbra's existence and were uncomfortable with its implications. These internal conflicts created windows of opportunity where key personnel might be persuaded to cooperate or provide crucial testimony. Calculating these windows required analyzing everything from stock option vesting schedules to upcoming industry conferences where vulnerable executives might be more accessible. Technological factors imposed their own temporal constraints. Certain pieces of evidence existed only in volatile formats: temporary server logs, ephemeral communications, automatically deleted files, that required precise timing for capture and preservation. My automated systems ran continuous analyses, predicting when critical data would become available or when security vulnerabilities in Richard's operations would be most exploitable. These predictions informed decisions about when to activate different phases of my counter-operation. The personal dimension of timing proved equally crucial. Maintaining my cover required careful management of my public presence. Social media activity needed to follow natural patterns, neither disappearing completely nor becoming suddenly prolific. Professional networking had to continue at a steady pace, with strategic connections cultivated over measured intervals. Even basic lifestyle elements like grocery shopping and gym visits had to conform to established routines to avoid raising suspicion about my true activities. Perhaps most challenging was managing the psychological impact of living according to such a rigid temporal framework. The constant awareness of approaching deadlines and optimal action windows created a state of perpetual anticipation. To maintain mental clarity, I implemented micro-routines, 5-minute meditation breaks every hour, 10-minute exercise bursts between tasks, that helped compartmentalize the pressure while keeping me focused on immediate priorities. The interplay between these various timelines created a complex choreography of action and reaction. Each move I made had to account for its impact on multiple concurrent sequences. How would revealing one piece of evidence affect Richard's timetable? How would delaying a media release influence investor confidence? What would be the cumulative effect of simultaneous legal and technical maneuvers? These calculations became second nature, guiding decisions with mathematical precision while allowing room for human unpredictability. As the various timelines converged, I found myself operating in a state of heightened awareness, where minutes stretched into hours and hours compressed into moments. The approaching climax of the operation demanded absolute synchronization between all elements: media, legal, technical, personal, each component calibrated to trigger at precisely the right instant. Timing had transformed from a tactical consideration into the very essence of the operation, dictating every decision and action with relentless precision. The convergence of events accelerated with alarming speed, each day bringing new revelations that complicated the already intricate web of my operation. Just as I prepared to initiate the next phase of my media campaign, an unexpected development threatened to derail months of careful planning. A major technology conference in Las Vegas, where Richard was scheduled to deliver a keynote address on the future of innovation, suddenly became ground zero for a potential disaster. My monitoring systems detected unusual activity surrounding his presentation materials, documents that bore striking similarities to my own research, repackaged with Innovatech's branding. The situation escalated further when Victoria received an anonymous tip containing internal Innovatech communications suggesting Richard intended to announce a breakthrough in digital privacy technology during his keynote. The timing couldn't have been worse. It coincided perfectly with our planned media rollout, threatening to muddy the waters of public perception and give Richard a platform to legitimize his theft. Worse still, Marcus reported that several key Innovatech investors would be attending, ready to commit significant funding based on this supposed breakthrough. Complicating matters further, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, custodian of one of my critical security components, found herself under intense pressure from her university's administration. Her department had received substantial grant offers from organizations linked to Innovatech's network of shell companies, creating a conflict of interest that threatened our carefully constructed chain of custody for crucial evidence. The academic community's traditional resistance to corporate influence was wavering in the face of substantial funding promises, putting our entire verification process at risk. Simultaneously, my legal team uncovered troubling information about Richard's connections to certain regulatory bodies. Through complex webs of political donations and lobbying efforts, he had established relationships that could potentially delay or obstruct our legal proceedings. These connections manifested in subtle but significant ways, unexpected delays in court document processing, mysteriously vanished evidence from public records, and sudden changes in regulatory enforcement priorities that conveniently aligned with Innovateka's interests. The technical landscape shifted dramatically as well. Richard's team, likely sensing the approaching confrontation, launched a sophisticated cyber attack that nearly compromised one of my overseas server nodes. While the breach was contained, the incident revealed new vulnerabilities in my system architecture that required immediate attention. The resources needed to address these weaknesses threatened to divert crucial funds from other operational aspects, forcing difficult prioritization decisions. Perhaps most unsettling was the emergence of a parallel narrative in the tech community. Influential bloggers and industry analysts, some of whom I had initially seeded with information, began speculating about my motives and credibility. Whispers of corporate espionage and industrial sabotage circulated through professional networks, painting me as the aggressor in a David and Goliath scenario. This unexpected reversal of public perception threatened to undermine the moral high ground we had carefully cultivated. These compounding challenges forced a complete reassessment of my strategy. The carefully orchestrated timeline had to be re-engineered on the fly, incorporating contingency plans for each new development while maintaining forward momentum. Resources had to be reallocated, alliances strengthened, and communication channels secured against increasing surveillance attempts. The operation had evolved from a controlled sequence of events into a dynamic battlefield where every advantage had to be fought for and defended. Yet amidst this chaos, patterns began to emerge that offered new opportunities. The convergence of so many elements at once created pressure points that, if exploited correctly, could amplify the impact of our revelations. Richard's desperation to present my stolen work as his own innovation at the technology conference, combined with the mounting evidence of Project Umbra's broader implications, presented a unique window for exposure. The challenge now was to navigate this perfect storm of circumstances without losing control of the narrative or compromising the integrity of our evidence. Every obstacle brought with it potential leverage points. The academic community's hesitation regarding corporate funding could be addressed through strategic partnerships with organizations committed to research integrity. The cyber attack revealed vulnerabilities in Richard's own security protocols that could be turned against him. Even the negative speculation about my motives provided opportunities to demonstrate authenticity through transparent documentation of my development process. The operation had transformed into a complex game of three-dimensional chess, where each threat carried within it the seeds of its own countermeasure. As I worked through these challenges, the operation's scope expanded beyond anything I had initially envisioned. What had started as a personal defense mechanism had grown into a comprehensive campaign to expose systemic corruption in the tech industry. The convergence of crises forced me to operate at a higher level of complexity, managing multiple threads of action while maintaining focus on the ultimate objective, not just protecting my own work, but creating lasting change in how the industry approached innovation and intellectual property rights. The atmosphere in my apartment crackled with electric tension as the various strands of my operation reached critical mass. My monitors displayed a kaleidoscope of information streams, real-time tracking of Richard's presentation uploads, encrypted communications with Victoria, system alerts from compromised nodes, and financial reports showing unusual movements in Innovateka's accounts. Each display represented another piece of the intricate puzzle I had been assembling for months, and now they were all converging toward a single point of no return. Technical preparations consumed every waking moment. I implemented emergency protocols across my network, creating redundant fail-safes for crucial data while simultaneously deploying countermeasures against Richard's increasingly sophisticated attacks. The cybersecurity firm he had hired was proving more competent than anticipated, forcing me to execute complex server migrations and protocol updates at a breakneck pace. My fingers flew across multiple keyboards, managing simultaneous processes that required absolute precision. A mistyped command could mean the difference between preserving evidence and losing everything. The human element of the operation demanded equal attention. Video conferences with key allies occurred in rapid succession, each call addressing different aspects of the unfolding crisis. Dr. Rodriguez required assurance and strategic guidance as she navigated her university's administrative pressures. Marcus needed precise instructions for gathering additional internal documentation without compromising his position. Sarah Chen, my attorney, conducted mock interviews and deposition preparations, ensuring everyone involved understood their roles in the approaching confrontation. Media coordination became a delicate balancing act. Victoria and I fine-tuned the release schedule for our revelations, adjusting timing to account for breaking developments while maintaining narrative coherence. Social media campaigns were preloaded and ready to launch, each post queued to appear at optimal moments for maximum impact. Backup channels were established to ensure continuity if primary communication lines were compromised. The public relations battlefield was as complex as the technical one, requiring constant vigilance against misinformation and counter-narratives. Financial resources reached their most critical juncture. Cryptocurrency transfers had to be carefully timed to avoid detection while providing necessary funding for operational costs. Legal retainers needed renewal, server maintenance required immediate attention, and security consultants demanded compensation for their specialized services. Each financial decision carried strategic implications, forcing me to prioritize expenditures with surgical precision while maintaining enough liquidity to adapt to unforeseen developments. The psychological toll mounted with each passing hour. Adrenaline kept me functioning, but the strain of managing so many concurrent operations began manifesting in physical symptoms: trembling hands, blurred vision, and a persistent metallic taste in my mouth. Short meditation breaks became essential for maintaining cognitive function, though they ate into precious operational time. The knowledge that every decision could have far-reaching consequences created a pressure cooker environment where mistakes carried catastrophic potential. Communication security reached new levels of complexity. Traditional encryption methods were augmented with quantum-resistant algorithms, while multi-factor authentication protocols were layered across all access points. Burner devices were activated and deactivated according to strict schedules, creating temporary windows of secure contact with trusted allies. Even the physical security of my apartment became paramount, leading to the installation of sophisticated surveillance countermeasures and emergency escape routes. As the final preparations took shape, the operation scale became almost overwhelming. What had started as a personal defense mechanism had evolved into a multifaceted campaign involving dozens of participants, hundreds of terabytes of evidence, and millions of dollars in resources. The interconnectedness of each element created a system where success depended on perfect synchronization, like a massive orchestra where every instrument must strike its note at precisely the right moment. The approaching confrontation loomed like a storm front, visible on every monitor and felt in every heartbeat. Every piece was in place, every contingency accounted for, every participant ready to execute their role. Yet beneath this apparent readiness ran an undercurrent of uncertainty, the knowledge that no matter how thorough the preparation, the chaos of actual execution could always introduce unforeseen variables. The operation had become a living entity, evolving and adapting in real time to the pressures bearing down upon it from all sides.